Two guys in the dark.
I was chronically traumatized by the medical cartel for 3 decades. I had seizures between the ages of 10 to 16. Currently, I am 53 years old. I started to have very horrific traumatic depressions by the time I was in my 20s, around college age. This got me into this system and into the role of mental ill. It also got me into a dissociative state to survive. As the years were progressing and my MDs told me about my bipolar disorder, I started to doubt my diagnosis, and I started to read Peter Levine. No matter what I did, I couldn't affect my mental, emotional, or behavioral health. I kept living the same traumas over and over. Most things people take for granted, I couldn't do, no matter how hard I tried. I started to read Waking the Tiger. I tried to talk about trauma to my GP, who pushed my concerns aside to focus on my pap smear. I tried to talk about trauma to my family and community, who rolled their eyes at me and said, yeah, veterans. After I located my C1, which happens to be my chiropractor, I told my GP, who I saw for 10 years. When I started to tell her about it, she projected stigma into me, telling me with a glint in her eye, I think people get help when they are ready to get help. This GP is named Diana. I saw her for a suicide attempt with my brother. After I had located the dissociative state, the welcome mat was a 1.5 years of trauma discharge and a 6-year psychotic break. My counselor, who I was seeing as my dissociative broke, watched me being called crazy by my coworkers. Her name is Stefani. She openly mocked me as I tried to get help from her. She told me that I was dedicated to my suffering. She also failed to perform a historical health care intake. I had unresolved trauma of ECT and 3 suicide attempts in my body. I had a 6-year psychotic break directly after this interaction with her. A month after my last appointment with her, she had texted me from her device asking for my medical reference for my somatic experiencing practitioner. The ND I am working with at the Amen Clinic tells me that I'm responsible for her behavior. I'm currently integrating the 1980s, the 1990s, and onward. I'm responsible for the MD's behavior, Eric and Mary from the 90s. These MDs told me lies and bullied me to do what they tell me to do. I was put in a 5150 unit in Torrance. I watched as the MD lied to the judge, and then I watched as the judge rubber-stamped the lie. I asked for trauma care, but was declined trauma care because I was told my insurance didn't cover it. I have trouble getting anyone to acknowledge the chronic abuse done to me by the medical cartel. I'm getting care by the Amen Clinic, but I'm not sure that the practitioner understands the abuse of me, as she continuously tells me that I'm responsible for my behavior. These MDs and PhDs can make up whatever they want. Sadly, my family fed the system with me. Even when I tried to get healthy, I spent 10 years in 12-step rooms, actively seeking solutions. I sent my MD named Ron a study that I had gotten off the internet about PTSD and the workplace. At this point, I had homicidal trauma and wanted to be healthy. Ron received the study, told me yes, that shows the theory with the practical. I was then pressured to get back to work, preferably with people, so that I could work on my issues. If I'm not working, I'm a slacker. Then I got 10 more years of compound trauma on top of homicidal trauma. I'm sick of being the abuse scapegoat and responsible for all of the MDs and PhDs who lie about me, misinterpret me, and re-injure me for their own amusement. Then I am the one responsible for them. I have not left the house for 8 years. My father likes to tell me that it's just mental. He also supports my siblings' abuse of me. My mental illness has made my siblings abuse me, as well as my sister-in-law. I have fragmented PTSD flashbacks daily. I have 10-year-old fragmented parts that I try to integrate every single day. I literally did not know that I had emotional needs until I was 45. What I have been through is inhumane. I cannot tell anyone to listen to me, other than telling me I'm responsible for everything. The medical cartel has bought everyone. Judges, media, the practitioners are very aware that they are protected by a medical cartel. It's much worse than most are aware. I fear for my life every single day. I can share a patient experience. I got insanely drunk one night, and my crazy got away from me. I did some stupid shit. I woke up around 4 p.m. the next day. After a quick shower, I barely had time to dress before the knock on my door. Local mental health crisis intervention team. There was 4 police officers. One of them had a trained mental health professional, and what seemed like half the force was waiting in the bushes in case I got out of hand. Now, I probably deserved to be arrested and given a court appearance for what I did, but they decided to drag me off to the psych ward instead. I spent 3 days sleeping on a stretcher in the intake office because there were no beds anywhere in the city. I was no longer drunk, and although I had the worst hangover in my life, and I was going through an incredibly difficult time in my personal life, I was no danger to anyone. Because of the situation I found myself in, I was very desperate to go home. I begged and pleaded to go home, and promised to go to outpatient treatment, a promise that I would very much keep. I explained in no uncertain terms that being there against my will was the worst place that they could put me for my mental health. They refused me. For the few days that I was on a stretcher in the intake, there were a couple other patients sleeping on stretchers as well. One was a suicidal girl who checked herself in. After 3 days of me begging to go home, they found a bed for me at another hospital. 2 minutes later, they tell the suicide girl that she has to go home because they don't have room for her in the city. I sat there and listened to her call her mother on the phone for a ride home, and all I can hear from the other end of the line is the mother screaming at her daughter for checking herself out and not getting the treatment that she promised that she would seek. The poor girl just sat there crying. What I wanted more than anything at the time was to get away from that horribly oppressive place that casts such a weight on my sanity that I can scarce imagine how anyone could be subject to such indignation and expected to retain their cognitive functions. In the end, I spent close to a month in a psych ward. After a couple of weeks, they showed up with a piece of paper they claimed was a court order, allowing them to force me to take drugs. Told me that if I didn't take the drugs, they would hold me down and then inject me with them. I took them and left a week later. I continued to try the drugs for a month or two for the sake of my ex, who had moved out while I was in the hospital. I wanted her back so bad. She ended up dumping me, and I stopped taking the pills, which literally did nothing for me except make me tired. In the end, the only thing to come out of the stay was a life experience that will scar me, and the understanding that you never, never seek help or open up to a mental health professional, ever. You're not a person to them. You're just a condition, and the things that come out of your mouth are not words, but rather products of the said condition. As a tech in a psych years ago, there was a 7-year-old kid sent to the floor because the mom didn't know what to do with him. Sadly, common thing to happen, even if the kids don't have psych issues. Anyways, the mom was shaking and crying. They had to take the kid into another room. She was genuinely afraid of her own son. She had suspected something was wrong when she kept finding mutilated animals in the backyard, but never heard or saw coyotes or anything else around. The neighbor's smaller pets started disappearing. The boy had an obsession with knives, hiding them around the house, denying anything when the mom had confronted him. Then when the two started getting into arguments, he would get really violent and hit her, push her down, kick her, threaten to kill her, all that kind of stuff. On multiple occasions, she woke up in the middle of the night with him standing beside her bed, staring her in the face. She put extra locks on her bedroom door just to feel safe while she slept. The last straw was when she lifted up his mattress and found 50+ knives of all shapes and sizes under there, so she brought him to us. I remember talking to him, treating him like he was just any other kid that had came through. He seemed remarkably normal, until you spoke directly to him. He had this way of looking right through you, or maybe like he didn't see you at all while you were speaking. He would respond like a robot, like he was just saying words because that's what we wanted to hear. and he would always put on this creepy, deadly-looking smile, like all mouth and no eye involvement in the smile, especially when he would get away with something, like taking another kid's markers, and they couldn't figure it out. It still gives me chills laying here thinking about him. I believe that I met a 7-year-old psychopath. One teen boy that I met had trouble getting along with others. His mother used to strike him with a whip while having intercourse with him on an altar as part of some kind of satanic ritual. Another boy was 11, and one of the best behaved children of this unit. This was amazing given the fact that his parents used all their children as child prostitutes, forced them to have sex with each other, and also forced them to eat feces with their oatmeal breakfast. A teen girl had overwhelmingly compulsives and to shove things into her vagina. We were forced to keep her in wrist or waist restraints with mittens on her hands to prevent this. She would put staples, pencils, anything really inside herself. She had been raped by all the men in her family, her brothers, father, and grandfather. I don't know the history of the other teen boy, but he would have sex with anyone and anything. He claimed to be sexually attracted to the space shuttle and desired to be a welding machine when he grew up. He was once caught masturbating with a grasshopper in his hand. When asked, he said that he was having sex with it. He had masturbated so much that they were required to give him a small cup of Vaseline at night so that he wouldn't chafe himself. I was a pharmacy technician at a hospital with a psych ward for some time. We would have to go around with a cart, dispense the patient's medications. Being a 5'2" girl, a security guard, or a male nurse would accompany me, just as a precaution. I never had any real issues other than the occasional death grip onto my arm, or a manic outburst. But there was one boy who was entirely different. His chart said that he was 9, and he had pale skin, dark hair, and huge, bright green eyes. He always greeted me in the most polite way, asked how I was doing, always found something different to compliment me on every single time. He was extremely well-spoken and mature for his age, so I began looking forward to seeing him, as normal small talk is definitely cherished in that setting. If he saw me outside of his room in the halls, he made sure that he would say hello, always called me Miss Jones or ma'am. One day, a couple of our female nurses saw me pause to chat with him in the hallway, waved me over to ask if I was out of my mind. Apparently, when he was in kindergarten, he grew an intense attachment to his young female teacher. This escalated to the point of him calling her mom, leaving notes for her about how he wished that he were her son. He had a normal life with both parents. The teacher tried to explain to him that she couldn't be his mom, because that would hurt his real mother's feelings, and that she already had that job covered. So he decided to go home, killed his own mother in her sleep while cutting her throat, so his teacher could be his mother. The female staff had a general rule of not interacting with him excessively to prevent any kind of attachment from forming.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.